Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Adam's Fall. I'm Adam, and I'm hoping to do an interesting video today. A frequent issue that I noticed in the Twitterverse and on YouTube and with Sam from Transfigured is the question about the Nicene Creed and Christian creeds in general and whether they're necessary to be a Christian to hold to the Nicene Creed or other creeds. And in addition, are these creeds erroneous or an abomination? And I have up here Sam from Transfigured just to give him props for his frequent discussions on this very topic. So if you're interested in learning about the Council of Nicaea or the Nicene Creed or what the Church Fathers thought about various Christological questions, he's an excellent resource. So wanted to give him a shout out once again. And the purpose of this video is actually to ask the question, is the Nicene Creed an abomination? I know that sounds like a very strong word, when I could have used erroneous or another word. But I'm choosing that word very purposely. And before I go more into it, I want to give some caveats that this is really just a few thoughts on the Nicene Creed and on whether it's an abomination. It's not meant to denigrate or really to do apologetics. It's just kind of more of a meditation, and I want to invite people's feedback about these thoughts and purposely, whether the following of creeds can be an abomination or really an idol, form of idol worship. So now, I'd say Sam from Transfigured mostly goes into it to show that he disagrees with the formulation of Nicene Creed and that it is erroneous. And I don't think necessarily you would use the word abomination or an idol, but it's interesting that somebody else within the Latter-day Saint tradition, specifically Joseph Smith, who is the founding prophet, he had an interesting theophany experience we call, quote, the first vision. And in this experience, Joseph Smith had a manifestation of God in which he experienced a personal encounter with God, the Father, and Jesus Christ. And interestingly, he prayed in a grove of trees to get answers about which church to join and perhaps his how he was doing in relation to God and what his role was going forward. And he was visited by two deities, which he identified as God and Jesus, who spoke to him and gave him guidance and instruction. And he described it as a vision which he had. And in this vision, God introduced Jesus, and then Jesus gave him instruction. And one of the instructions I'd like to read a little bit further. And so we'll see in Joseph Smith's history that in verse 18 he talks about, and I'd like to invite you to follow along. I'll read a little bit here. I apologize, but if you could follow me, he says, "My object in going to inquire of the Lord was to know which of all the sects was right, that I might know which to join. No sooner, therefore, did I get possession of myself so as to be able to speak than I asked the personages who stood above me in the light, which of all the sects were right. For at this time it had never entered into my heart that all were wrong, and which I should join. I was answered that I should join none of them, for they were all wrong, and the personage who addressed me said that all their creeds were, quote, an abomination in his sight." So this is where the topic of today's video comes from. Is the creeds, or are they an abomination? And that's a very strong word. So I wanted to talk more about what an abomination is from a context in 1830. This history was written in 1838, so it would have used language and dictionary, maybe the Webster's Dictionary we have access to from 1828. And in the 1828 dictionary, it describes an abomination as potentially extreme hatred or detestation, but also if you go back to the bottom, it can also describe just defilement or pollution, or something is morally or physically unclean or corrupt. And so, if we take the definition of an abomination as something that's unclean or corrupt, or could make us corrupt, then could it be that a creed could be called an abomination? And I think specifically where this definition is pertinent is that often abominations were associated with idol worship, and in Old Testament, New Testament, they were referred to as abomination, as the worship of idols. So let's go to the same dictionary and see what they define as idols according to the 1828 dictionary. And it involved the use of images, usually of a man or other animal, a person that was loved or honored, or anything on which we set above God. So that could be a form of idolatry. And I'm of the opinion that sometimes the creed could be a form of idolatry if that the creed takes precedent over the relationship with God himself. And so an idol can be anything that we indulge that's something above God. And so we can, as we go back to the Joseph Smith history, uh, Jesus apparently is reported to have said that their professors were all corrupt. They draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They teach for doctrines the commandments of men, having a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. So that's interesting that it may be that in the context, an abomination could refer to people that say with words, they may repeat, oh, you need to be, in order to be a Christian, you need to adhere to the Nicene Creed. But really, they were just talking with their lips, but their hearts were not Christian. They were not acting or acting in a way that was Christian, and their hearts weren't, in a sense, Christian. So they were using it more as a boundary maintenance, as a way to push other people away. And I think in that sense, where people are not acting or not disciples of Christ, but using it, the creeds, as a form of boundary maintenance, that can be an abomination. And I also like to uh, think of an abomination in the sense that if the creed is only a set of words and can't possibly describe the totality of the experience of God, can we really encapsulate Paul's experience on the road to Damascus in a set of words? That experience left him blind and totally changed the course of his life. Can you really encapsulate that in a Nicene Creed? Um, no, of course, God is far transcending of any creed or any human words that would describe him. And in that sense, if we try to encapsulate God in a set of words or a definition, we are, in a sense, corrupting or limiting what God is. And there's a chance that people will discount their experiences of God because maybe they think it doesn't pertain or matches the Nicene Creed. And the same is true for the experience of Joseph Smith, because he reports, and if we go back and read his experience after he had it, he said, when I came to myself again, I found myself lying on my back, looking up into heaven, as if he had had a earthly and heavenly experience, had lifted up toward heaven, and that as he fell back to earth, he was now looking from whence he came. And when the light departed, I had no strength, but soon recovered, was soon recovering in some degree. So the experience was so transformative that he was left without strength. And so often these types of experience are types of theophanies or visions are indescribable. And it's very hard for the person experiencing them to actually put words to them. And so one of the potential concerns about a creed is that where a group of people, like several 100 bishops get together, like in the Council of Nicaea, 200 to 300 bishops came together, are they really basing the description of God on just a consensus or a Platonic formulation, or is it based on the experiences of the people we look to form a religion? And one particular group that Jesus spoke directly against were a group of people called the Pharisees. And certainly the Pharisees had a council and a group of collective wisdom that they relied upon. But just because they were collective and they were, quote, the experts, doesn't mean they had the right formulation. So sometimes I think groups can arrive at good solutions, but sometimes they can discount something that they're willing to see or that would meet a consensus. And I think Jesus fits that formulation. Obviously, he was crucified by these same individuals because he was outside their what they were willing to tolerate. So, just a couple of thoughts that I want to talk about is the creed and abomination. Now, in the Latter-day Saint tradition, we do not think that if you adhere to a creed or don't adhere to a creed or have the perfect understanding of who God is, that you will or will not be able to be saved or have salvation. In LDS tradition, it's much more, are we becoming disciples of Christ? Are we becoming more like him and more like God? Because ultimate purpose is to be transformed, and God's ultimate purpose for us is to become like him and to have the joy that he has and to act as one, as John 17 talks about, to become one with him and Jesus. And so it's more about how we're becoming rather than what we're proclaiming with our lips, as we read about earlier. So I invite you to pass along any comments or feedback. It's kind of an interesting topic. And I think that when creeds are put out as boundary maintenance, or when the person doesn't really have a relationship with Christ, or when it's used to subvert somebody's experience, or to try to encapsulate the totality of God when it's clear that that cannot be encapsulated in human words or definitions, I think it truly can be a form of idolatry and an abomination or a corruption of what God is. So thank you for your time and attention. Have a wonderful rest of your day.